believe that the innovation communities, so our KIC, so to speak, will be kind of interclusters à la lettre. Huh? Sure, intercluster organization could become a KIC. At this point in time, KIC is under the umbrella of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, so it would have to apply in the next call. But I would argue, you know, even independent of calls, if some of these elements in KICs work, which I'm going to assume after all the hard work that we put in, you know, then I would have nothing against, in fact, only things for it, that intercluster would build up KICs in their own intercluster right. There is nothing wrong with the concept then. One can, of course, ask the question, why does Europe need world-class interclusters? I would probably give a rhetoric answer, because if you continue to avoid world-class clusters in Europe, that means your economic leadership will be gone in the next 20 years. Very simple, because these are the melting pots today of new business activity, of money creation, of export, of new jobs and so forth. And it's also a melting pot for our education system to really have the opportunity of great attraction centers for students, for professors, who have you. So for me there is a must. Then typically European, I'm always asked, do we need 20 or 40 or 50? And there I have a very outspoken opinion. I am sure that intercluster-wise you will start with 20 or 30 or 40, right? But at the end of the day, the notion world-class means you will probably be left with 4 or 5 on that level. And world-class can really be measured very easily, because if that cluster can export its knowledge to other parties in other countries outside Europe, if the other parties are willing and very eager to cooperate or compete with that cluster, you're doing the right job. And this, as I understood it from a distance, you know, is what intercluster is trying to accomplish for Europe. I do believe there is a couple of traps on the way, if I may mention a few. One is this whole issue of measurement. You can spend 5 years on the whole measurement issue in Europe and have achieved nothing. Another very important trap is the issue of how do you manage all of this? The fragmentation in clusters in Europe is very, very high, right? The reason for this is also very clear, because there have been regional incentives, there have been national incentives, right? And based on that, you know, the fragmentation has built up. If you want to come to clusters of significant mass, transnational, cross-national borders, the ones that you are talking about, you definitely, in my view, need to add this European dimension. EIT is then one way to do it. There may be other ways, right? And I'm very open for suggestions. The only thing I know is we have to do it. And we have to do it in a can-do sense, not in a inwardly focused European way in which we constantly ask questions and after question. Right? And at the end of the day, after 5 years, still say, well, we still have a few questions left. The Chinese laugh at us. And I'm serious.
Just do it.
Do it. Just do it. So that's why your organization is so important. That's why I like it very much. For I don't think that you want 20 or 40 of world-class clusters in Europe. It doesn't make any sense. We don't have the space for it. And if you look at India, China, United States, typically you can identify 4 or 5, and these are continents as big as Europe, right? So that's a plus. Yes, there is many barriers in the way. I think there is only one way to go across the barriers. That is, you have to make the next step in cluster management. I don't believe you get to world class if you are not on a particular domain. Let's say that you will do innovation in, I don't know, solar energy, right? You have to appoint a leader. You will have to accept the leadership. And yes, some leaders will fail, and that's at the end of the cluster, too bad, pity. And other leaders will make it happen, and you end up with an industry that is competitive, that is new, that is inspirational, and so forth. But the European way of just coordinating and managing and maybe give a little bit of operational responsibility alone is not good enough. It's my conviction. I really believe in leadership, even in wrong leadership, if you understand what I mean, because at least I know very quickly that something is going to die, and that's it, right? And this is, so this is one element. This is something where the industry, the businesses, also higher education can help. The other element is the fragmentation in the ideas that exist in this domain in the European Commission, in the European Parliament. Very different notions in very different countries. You already alluded to it, right? Yeah, I sincerely hope that the new European President and also, the President of the Commission, Barroso, will step up to this effort and start helping you on getting these points across. Because if clustering remains to be just solely the domain of regional incentives and national incentives, this is not going to work. So there has to be a European schedule. Now, EIT is one example, but I like to be modest. We're going to try and put this on the road, but obviously this is only one stone that you put in the pot. And there has to be a lot more things that need to be done. Right? So there's two elements. This leadership to me is very important because commitment also will never come without leadership. There's no way. Parties will not commit. They will just keep talking. And this is, and let me maybe also mention one element which is totally not in the way. There's a complete misunderstanding about this in Europe. The one element that is just not in the way is intellectual property. This is not true. And even the leading big industries in Europe know this very well. I mean, they have gone into China, into India, where they lost the intellectual property protection. They still are selling stuff. They use it as an R&D basis today. And they use it with hardly any protection today, right? That's not the issue. The European patent is not the issue. It's not in the way. What is in the way is that we keep focusing on our old values instead of moving forward and say, look, we can do this too. We don't need Chinese for this. We can do this too. That's what is in the way.